Hi everyone, Purple Celery here. Thank you for joining me. This week I'm taking a butcher's at episode 9 of series 12 of Doctor Who, Ascension of the Cybermen. So after the events of last week's episode, the fam is in the near future, helping the last scraps of humanity escape from the Cybermen. Now the group quickly splits into two. One half of the group, with Graham and Yaz and some of the human survivors, end up on this massive Cyberman spaceship, which turns out to be a troop carrier. The other half of the group, which includes the Doctor, Ryan and several other human survivors, try to make it to a mysterious place called the Boundary. I really liked the Doctor in this episode. I liked how she kind of casually mentions to the fam at the start that, oh yeah, by the way, we're in the far future where the Cybermen have wiped out nearly all of the human race. And then she's like, oops, sorry, yeah, I forgot to mention that earlier. I also liked how she was concerned that her companions were becoming a bit reckless, and that sort of was a bit of a callback to companions like Clara or Bill, who ended up being harmed by the Doctor's lack of care, or what the Doctor perceived to be his, at the time, lack of care, and the fact that they got a bit reckless. So we saw the Doctor in a very self-sacrificing move, which I think is great because it really goes to the heart of the Doctor's character. I also like the moments between Graham and Yaz in this episode. Graham seemed to have stopped complaining about how hungry he was, and he was trying to be the voice of positivity and encouraging the others, and Yaz was like saying, oh, you know, good for you, Graham O'Brien. So that was like a lovely moment between the two. I felt of all the companions, Ryan had the least to do in this episode. It also seems too like the writers have kind of forgotten about his dyspraxia, because he seems to be like a lot more coordinated this series, and I don't think that it's really been brought up at all, his condition. Again, there were a lot of guest characters. This seems to be like a bit of a norm for this series 12, like almost every episode has had like a pretty large guest cast. And I guess, again, I feel like I didn't get overly attached to any of them. The stroppy guy in Graham and Yaz's group with the round poppy eyes annoyed me a bit. He was just, I don't know, whinging all the time, and I felt like telling him to be quiet. The others, you know, they were okay. They were there, you know, I guess they were no more or less interesting than any guest cast in a Doctor Who episode. I guess having said that, there wasn't really a lot of time to get to know them in this episode. The Lone Cyberman was back, and he was properly scary again. He's always quite sadistic, this guy, like in the way how he killed the young boy's father rather than the young boy himself towards the start of the episode. The Lone Cyberman also reminds me a little bit of Voldemort from the Harry Potter books, in that he has like a lot of hatred within him, but if you dig a little deeper, much of that hatred is directed at himself. So like Voldemort had a Muggle father and he hated the Muggles. The Lone Cyberman hates humanity, but he's kind of half human as well. Turning to the Cybermen drone heads, they didn't quite work for me. They just looked a bit naff and a bit silly, so I don't know, that fell a little bit flat for me. But I felt like the real interesting thing about this episode was the B plot about Brendan. So right from the start, we saw that Brendan wasn't all who he seemed to be. He was this mysterious baby who was abandoned in a basket. He fell off a cliff and basically walked away unscathed. At first I thought, oh yeah, I kind of know where this is going. I reckon that Brendan's going to be the Lone Cyberman. And then I thought that Brendan could have been the old guy with the white beard. I want to say Kokomo. I know that that's not his name. It was Shamor or something like that. So I thought maybe that's who Brendan turns out to be. But then the B plot was kind of turned on its head during the scene when Brendan retires. And then when he walks out of the Garda station, he sees his father and his former boss, the other police officer, who haven't seemed to have aged a day. And then they do something horrible, like I think they were wiping his memory or something, which makes me think that maybe the dad and the police boss are aliens or Gallifreyans or Time Lords or something like that who don't age. Or else maybe Brendan is hallucinating, and this life growing up in the quaint Irish village and becoming a garter, that was just one possible life that Brendan could have had. Incidentally, during that scene, I did enjoy the symbolism of the clock that Brendan receives as a retirement gift, and the fact that I think it was his father, basically puts the clock aside before they torture him, indicating that time has stopped. So, massive spoiler alert. The Master is back, and once again it looks like he's somehow involved with the Cybermen. It looks like Gallifrey is also back. That's what's on the other side of the boundary, which kind of then raises the question. So it looks like the last remnants of the human race, assisted by the Kokomo dude, have been crossing the boundary, and Gallifrey is on the other side of that boundary, which then raises the question. Does this mean that the humans are the ancestors of the Gallifreyans and the Time Lords? That would maybe add some credence to like the Master's comment about to the Doctor about everything that you know is a lie. So maybe Gallifrey was founded by humans, basically. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I feel like we've only got one episode to go, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of things to wrap up in next week's episode. For example, what's the Master up to? Who is Brendan? Are we going to see the Ruth Doctor again? How are Graham and Yaz and the others going to get off that troop ship? How's the Doctor going to beat the Master and the Cyberman? I'm hoping that next week's episode is going to be a bit longer than average because, yeah, otherwise I feel like tying up all those loose ends might make things a bit rushed. Overall, I feel like Ascension of the Cybermen was a pretty good, solid episode. I'd probably give it about a 7.5. So that's it from me for this week. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts, so please leave them in the comments section below. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys next week when I take a look at episode 10, which I think is titled The Timeless Children. So until then, have a good week. This is Purple Celery, over and out. See ya.